Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation on the impact of intimacy. I'm really excited to share with you this idea that I've been working on for a little while and just explain some of the importance of what we're talking about. When we look at the idea of intimacy, what it means for us both on an individual level and also when it comes to our relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about math to start off with. So we're going to start off with the number one. Now, one is a whole number. It is an integer. And I like this idea of an integer because what an integer means is related to our word integrity. It's the idea of wholeness within oneself. There's no part that is separated. There's no part that is isolated or left out. So when we're in a relationship, every part of us is there. And so let's just talk a little bit about a relationship. When we are a whole person, we are whole and complete, this full circle. We often have the ability and interest in reaching out. This is the idea of love. Love is the idea of unity. It wants to connect with the other. And here we have, let's say we've got two different directions we're reaching out here, at least at this point. And the number one relationship in the human life is reaching out to God. And interesting enough, humanity being a reflection of God, we understand God being a Trinity, this idea of three persons in one, the nature of God being a relationship of love, this being the origin of all that is in the world, of our human experience and our calling as human beings. Now, interesting enough, we are reaching out to love, but the only reason we are able to do that is because love first reached out to us. And so if we want to begin living our life with a loving expression, our first step is actually to receive. And the ability to receive love, to experience intimacy, is actually something that can be hard for a lot of us. It's something that's not natural. I think oftentimes because we're afraid that it's going to go away. I know, at least in the Christian tradition I was raised in, God's love could be withdrawn if I did the wrong thing. So I spent a whole lot of my life being scared to receive because, what if I actually like this? What if I have this relationship and then what if it goes away? And those of you who study attachment theory recognize some of this. But the reason why I'm bringing it in here is the importance of receiving, but also this idea that as humans, we don't just receive love, we also give. And when we look at the mystery of sexuality and of the human body and of the creation of life, we recognize that there is a feminine function and a masculine function that's part of that. This is why sex and intimacy are so closely intertwined and why our experience of relationships is so complicated when we don't have a safe space to talk about it. Because a healthy relationship dynamic includes both the masculine and the feminine energy. Now, this dynamic is here in the relation between God and the individual. And notice what happened. We went from a single point, which has no dimension whatsoever, again, back to mathematics, to having 2 points. And the relationship between these 2 points has created a line. We've now moved into a one-dimensional reality, which is amazing. But what happens now if we're in relationship with God, and we also have another person, a whole human being, an integrated person living in their integrity, and we also want to connect with them? Now, a lot of you have seen this triangle in terms of romantic relationships, right? We've all seen this. As you draw close to God, and they draw close to God, you both end up meeting somewhere over here. And what I want to do is expand our understanding of intimacy beyond just one person, because intimacy is a part of every single relationship we have. It's not even just part of our relationship with humans, it's part of our relationship with food. The food that we eat becomes part of us. We are one with the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, with all things. And other people can help us to realize, help us to experience that. And they can make it easier, or they can also make it harder. And so we'll talk just for a second about this, because here's another person. And let's just say that we have a masculine person over here and a feminine person over here. So this person here is really good at giving, but they really struggle to receive. This person over here, maybe they have the opposite sort of energetic composition. Maybe they're really, really good at receiving, and it's harder for them to actually learn how to give. Now, when they connect with each other, they're able to do something called exchange. This is the idea of learning from each other, that we share our strengths and weaknesses. And here we can learn, because as we're each relating to God, we have God in each other. And as we learn to recognize, to value, to love, to draw close to God as we see in each other, draw close to God together, we're able to practice these dynamics of giving and receiving. These are the dynamics of a relationship that goes two ways. Now, the strength of the bond depends upon our ability to function in both of these, whether we're talking about giving and receiving in our relationship with God or with another person. And so the value of bringing another person in is that God is, and we'll put this up here, God is spirit, right? God doesn't have a body that we interact with as human beings on a basis. So when we bring in another human, and they have a body, now we're able to interact and engage with an invisible reality through a visible person, if we can learn to see God in each other. Now, again, we're talking about this side having more of a feminine orientation. When we think about the female body, when it comes to the creation of life, it's an incredibly embodied experience. The woman's body carries a child for 9 months. A man's body contributes to this process, but in some invisible way that we can't see. This is the idea behind inspiration. Like when we talk about being inspired or receiving from the spirit, we're talking about actually being in a feminine function. And that's why it's so important for us to learn to have both of these, so we can be inspired, but also then so that we can be abundant, that we can give, that we can invest, that we can, and we'll talk about this in just a second. But I want to put over here this idea of the mind, which is this idea of something that is invisible, but also something that is tangible. So we have kind of this masculine function. Often a lot of people talk about masculinity in terms of the logos, or this idea of structure, order, mathematics even, which is great, because we're about to jump right into a little bit more of mathematics. Because remember, when we're talking about male and female, and particularly about sex, we recognize that the most potent, powerful human creative force is the ability to create life. It absolutely amazes me that human beings can create other human beings. This is something nothing else, we don't see this any other place. And the way that this happens is as we draw closer and closer together. Now think about this. Remember, we've made a triangle now that we have 3 different points. And let's just say, if you've ever seen an example of like a boiling pot of water, we're going to go jump to physics really quick. As the water heats up, it expands, right? There's all kinds of steam that comes. And so the ability of this relationship bond to carry all of that energy, all of that force, depends upon the strength of all 3 of these relationships. We don't really want to give up any one of them as important. And now the closer together, the more compression, like say we all start off being very far away from each other, and we gradually move closer together, which is what love does. It moves toward oneness. All of that pressure builds up inside the relationship. And unless we know how to navigate that, these bonds can break, they can suffer, and they can explode. But here's the thing. If we know how to work with the power of intimacy, this force can also be channeled into the creation of life. It can be channeled into the creation of incredible things. And we understand now this idea that we're receiving from God, we're receiving from each other, and we are able to then give of ourselves to the creation of something else altogether. Now, this is the mystery of sex in the creation of life. This is the power that we're working with when we're talking about intimacy in these relationship dynamics. But we're not just talking about that, because we could be referring to the creation of life, which is the biological and visible demonstration of this power. But there is also a spiritual dimension to it. There's also a mental dimension to it. There is a relational dimension. And really what we could be doing here is we could be using this powerful partnership to create anything. It's not just for the creation of children. This is the idea behind be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. It's all part of this same process. And the way that we fulfill this, which is the first commandment in the Bible, the first time we receive a commandment from God as a blessing, who we are by nature of being human beings are people who are fruitful, who multiply, who fill the earth. The way that this happens is by coming together in intimacy. Sex reveals this mystery to us. But as we were talking about, remember, it's not just about the biological aspect. It reveals the mystery so we can understand something even more of the creative process. Because look what happened here. We started off with a single point, we moved to two, now we have one dimension, we moved to the triangle, now we have two dimensions. But if, instead of focusing just on our little relationship that we have here, we can come together with another person with the intention of creating something. We all know that there's potential in this connection for the creation of new human life. That just tells us how powerful it is. But that is not the only thing that can be created with this energy. If we know how to come together, we can channel this power into the creation of all kinds of things. And this is the big challenge for us in learning how to relate, and why we're not just talking about a marriage relationship here. We're talking about any kind of connection that you have with someone else. Talking about this mystery of both being part of, and actually let's move into the next step, because I want to show you one more thing that is incredibly beautiful. Because we're not just talking about you, someone else, God, and then the creation of something through our coming together in intimacy. We are also, as a whole, talking about something that is happening internally inside of each one of us. And that our external experiences of relationships are actually a reflection of our internal state. Again, there's this idea of making visible what is invisible. This idea that when we are triggered or activated by this pursuit of external intimacy, it reveals to us a way that we can build deeper internal intimacy. This idea of integrity is so closely related to the idea of love, that we as human beings, being made up of spirit, of body, of mind, and of that which we create, that which we relate to in the world, that our experience of relationships is both internal and external. And our experience of intimacy with God and with others is a part of helping us to grow in intimacy or integrity with ourselves. So this is a lot of ideas coming together. But what I want to think about for just a second is the impact of intimacy. Because say we start off as human beings, we don't know how our bodies function at all. As little children, we need people to take care of us in every single way. We don't know how to feed ourselves. We don't know how to get rid of waste. We do know how to breathe, which is, I think, quite fortunate. But this idea of the bodies being something that we gradually come into deeper harmony and relationship with, the mind as something we gradually learn how to cultivate, the spirit as something we learn how to be in, to embody, to express, and all of these different dimensions of ourselves coming together prepare us to experience intimacy with another person. Because as we remember, integrity or internal wholeness precedes external wholeness. Otherwise, if we're not in integrity with ourselves, we're going to enter relationships on the basis of need and seek to find in another person what can only be found in ourselves. And the role of that other person is not to complete what is missing. The role of that other person is to be part of that ongoing process. This is the idea of God in the creation process. He says it's not good for a man to be alone, for a human to be alone, because if we are created in the image of God, God being spirit, he manifests, he creates, he puts forward into this material reality the invisible mystery of himself. Ever since the creation of the world, these things are clearly seen. We are interacting with God in all of these ways, and we can then interact with another person in these ways. We need each other to reflect in order to balance out, to learn, to grow, to embody the mystery of God to one another, that we might all grow together in intimacy. And if we remember, the closer we come together, again, from a two-dimensional to even the three-dimensional, the more compression there is of our life with the mystery of God, with the mystery of each other, the greater force and power there is for the creation of life. Now, again, the greater force there is, the stronger these bonds must be. And that's why it's so important for us to learn how to be in healthy relationships with one another. And that's what I'm teaching. That's why I'm here. You can't see the full thing, but I teach Christians how to experience intimacy with God and with each other. Because as we draw close and the pressure increases, our capacity for creating something beautiful increases, and our capacity for implosion also increases. So let's learn how to strengthen these bonds. Let's learn how to be intentional about what we create, not just accidentally come together in intimacy and suddenly we're producing all kinds of children or things that we don't want. Not that everybody doesn't want children, but being intentional about the things that we decide to create together. And as we become more whole, as we become more in integrity with ourselves, our capacity for intimacy with others also increases. So I hope this kind of gives you some insight into this multi-level process that we're looking at. The external world being a reflection and participation of the internal world. The visible world being a manifestation of the invisible world, the human being being an embodiment of God in creation. We are the point where heaven meets earth. And as we are able to cultivate intimacy with God, as we are able to strengthen each other in that process of becoming whole, to reflect to each other the full mystery of humanity, we can see such beautiful things come out. So I was just excited to share that with you. Just came up with this diagram today. But if you have any questions about it, does it raise any thoughts or ideas for you? I would love to hear from you about it. Feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to send me a message. This is really something that I'm passionate about because I think, again, we don't talk about sex enough in a Christian context. And for that reason, we miss out on so much of this intimacy and capacity for us to grow in our connection with God and with each other. So let's change that. I'm so glad you're on board with me. Thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to continuing our conversation. Cheers.